Hi, welcome to Catholic Breakfast. We are doing Confessions over coffee, taking a look at Saint Augustine's Confessions. Today, Book 3. And I want to explore some of the riches in Book 3 of Confessions, especially for Catholic moms and dads who are worried about the spiritual lives of their children. I'm excited about Book 3 of Saint Augustine's Confessions because this is where he opens up some of the details about his relationship with his mom, Monica. Saint Monica, as she's known to Catholics now. Monica herself had her own journey, which I won't be able to go into too much detail now, but Book 3 is amazing. And I just want to point out a couple of the details of what is going on with Saint Augustine, especially with what Monica does that works so well. So here it is. Book 3 is when Augustine is 16 to 18. Now, in terms of our cultural context, that's probably more like when a kid goes off to graduate school or college. So he's really becoming a man now. And he says in the opening line, "I came to Carthage, where a cauldron of illicit loves leapt and boiled about me." Pretty good description of college, right? Or grad school. So he's away from home, and his mom's really worried about him. What happens to Augustine in Carthage? He says, "At that time, you know, O light of my heart," of course he's speaking to God here, "those writings of the apostle Paul were not yet known to me, but the one thing that delighted me in Cicero's exhortation was that I should love and seek and win and hold and embrace not this or that philosophical school, but wisdom itself, whatever that might be." What's happening here to Augustine is a shift, is a very important shift. He's shifting from lower loves to higher loves, lower desires to higher desires. Now, Monica, his mom, was encouraging this. He says in another place where his mom and dad, they didn't do a perfect job. They did, to his detriment, they did encourage him in some of the things that led him down some bad roads, but they were encouraging him to pursue wisdom. It's philosophy, right? The love of wisdom. This was so important for Augustine because, at this stage in his life, God and Christ and the church and these high theological things were like answers to questions that he wasn't asking. He's moving in the right direction. So think you're like a college student who's just, they go to college and all they want to do is play video games and drink beer and have sex and have fun and just party and all that. If you think your life is just about having pleasure or just a good time, the gospel is not going to, taking up the cross of Jesus is not going to seem like a very logical answer to that question. But when someone starts to ask questions like, okay, what's the purpose of my life? What's a good life? How do I become happy? Those are all philosophical questions. Questions that are higher than simply questions of what we would call science, right? How does chemistry work? How does biology work? But higher questions, pursuing wisdom. What does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to be true? What is the nature of beauty? So as a mom or a dad, you want to encourage your children in that trajectory. It's great too because philosophy is like a mediating discipline between those lower things and finally the highest things of the soul. The second thing I want to point out about this moment in Augustine's life, as Monica is encouraging him to pursue wisdom, and he's actually going in a pretty good trajectory, there's a little bit of a wall that he hits with respect to the Bible, the Scriptures. So here's Augustine in Book 3, Chapter 4. He says, "So I resolved to make some study of the sacred Scriptures and find out what kind of books they were." Right, and if you're Saint Monica, what's your response? Finally, right? Okay, thank God, he's going to read the Bible, everything's going to be fine. Not so fast, because Augustine says, "But what I came upon was something not grasped by the proud." He says, when he read the Scriptures, he read something utterly humble in the hearing, and he said, "My conceit was repelled by their simplicity." Boy, is that true. So his point here is that the high wisdom of the Scriptures, the Trinity, the Incarnation, etc., is inaccessible to someone who's proud. And here's the kind of the paradox, right? To want the gospel, to want Christ, you have to have this high desire for wisdom. But there's a kind of occupational hazard with seeking wisdom, which is pride. I can think here of parents that I've ministered to who are kind of at their wits' end, where they say things like, my son, he's 30 years old, he's the smartest kid I've ever met in my life. He's got 2 PhDs and 3 master's degrees. But yet, he thinks the faith is so stupid. Or I've got a daughter, she's got, multiple degrees in French literature, but she picks up the Bible and she thinks it's just for kids. Well, that's what Augustine was experiencing too. There is something humble, like the scriptures that do have kind of a humble doorway, right? You go to Christmas Mass and you hear the scriptures, and it's about this kid wrapped in swaddling clothes laying in a manger. But then Augustine's reading these high philosophical books and these different philosophical schools, and he says, well, clearly the Bible's for like kids. But later he discovers, much later, that there is the highest possible wisdom in the scriptures, but it requires kind of bowing your head. So as moms and dads, I would say, don't be surprised when maybe your kids go to Mass and it seems like child's play. When you send them some Bible quotes on Facebook or on a text message, and they're just kind of like, seems like kid stuff. Don't be surprised at that. But see, you never know what's happening in their lives, because maybe something in their life is humbling them, is kind of drawing their pride down. And now they want wisdom, and their hearts have been humbled to receive it. So just be attentive to what's happening in the lives of your kids. If they're in a really proud, and I mean that in like a negative way, if they're filled with their own ego and their own sort of narcissistic achievements, they're probably not going to be that perceptive to the gospel. But if they're in a moment of humility, or maybe a more genuineness experience of their own, the poverty of their own lives, there may be a real openness there to the scriptures, which is exactly what happens to Augustine later on, and Monica is there to help him through it. Third thing I want to point out, and lastly, is a part where Monica has a dream. She's in this very interesting place in her life where Augustine is living in sin, he's in a bad situation, he's far from God, and it's really killing her. And she's trying to decide, what do I do? Do I intervene strongly? Do I pull back and just let him know I love him, or whatever? Very common situation today. It sounds very contemporary. Well, she has a dream, and the dream is in chapter 11 of book 3, where she sees kind of this boy come to her, and he says this line to her, and she interprets it a certain way, and the way she interprets it as, I should move in with Augustine. And then her and Augustine have this fight over how to interpret the dream. He says, oh, Mom, and he's kind of condescending, right? Kind of typical cocky young man coming into the fullness of his intellectual powers. And he says, oh, Mom, your dream means that you're going to become like me. And she's like, no. It means you're going to become like me. Don't read that as a woman who's just trying to force her will or enable his dysfunction. Or she's definitely not giving up on him. But rather what she's doing is trying to discern how God is leading her. And she does it with such confidence and conviction. It took 9 years, everybody, before that experience sunk into Augustine. 9 years later, he realized, my mom was speaking a word from God to me. What patience, right, we should have with people whom we love, and especially children who maybe spiritually are far from God. Monica is a great example of that. Here's what I love about the way Monica acts with Augustine at this point in his life and in her life. She embraces this call really to be a missionary to him. She doesn't see her job as, my job's to control him, tell him what to do, be a good mother, a bad mother. My job is a missionary. And so she goes into his life confident that she's heard God speak to her, and then she goes in there with this confidence. It works, everybody. It works. Of course it works, because it's God's plan. By the way, later we'll find out that she meets Ambrose, and that Ambrose told her patience, right? Patience. That's good advice for a missionary. Keep doing your missionary work. Keep following God's will, whatever he tells you to do to that person, but then be patient. God will take care of the results. Everybody, thanks for checking out book 3 of Saint Augustine's Confessions. If you want to follow along with our group on Facebook, it's Catholic Breakfast, Confessions over Coffee. Love to know what you think about book 3. Got some questions to stir up some conversation amongst the whole Catholic Breakfast community.